this evening will be. So can we hold off on the recording until we officially start?
Sure, hang on 2 seconds.
Good evening. I'm Rhonda Haig, the Chief Resilience Officer with Mornoe County, also the Program Manager for the Canal Restoration Program. Want to welcome all of our guests this evening. This is going to be about a little background on what we've been doing for the past decade. This is our second public meeting. We had one about a month earlier in February, and we want to welcome all of our guests tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and let our team go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with Greg Corning from Wood.
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening. Greg Corning, I'm the project manager for Wood Environment and Infrastructure for the county's canal restoration program. And I'll turn it over to Rick Fraxatis. We'll go around the horn for Wood.
Hey, good evening. Hope you're all ready to enjoy a nice presentation on this wonderful project. I'm Rick Fraxatis. I work with Greg on this project, and as Rhonda will mention, we've been working on it for over a decade at this point. A lot of interesting stuff to cover, so looking forward to your questions and anything you want to add.
All right, Renee, you want to go off, and then we'll give Stephen Hanks finally.
Hi, I'm Renee Rust, and I do outreach and engagement for Wood, and I work with Greg and Rick and for Rhonda.
All right, Stephen Hanks there.
Hi, I'm Stephen Hanks. I'm a senior engineer with Wood, and I've been working on this project pretty much my entire career, going back starting in around 2007, 2008. So it's been very interesting working on this throughout the duration.
Thank you. All right, let's jump into it. Do we have any commissioners with us this evening? I don't see any on the list. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into it. So tonight we're going to talk to you a little bit about the Canal Restoration Program and why we have one, why canal restoration is needed, what is our official work plan that we're obligated to, some of the canal restoration rankings and the canals in them, the program progress that we've had over the last decade. Next. Some of our program goals, regulatory requirements, not just touch on those, and some of the restoration technologies that we've been using in the field, and then how we fund these programs. And if you look at that picture to your right, you see an air curtain there. That's what we call a weed gate air curtain, and it keeps out floating vegetation. We'll get into that a little bit later. I just like to explain it. And then at the end, we'll take all the time that's needed for all of your questions so that we can respond. So don't think that we're going to be in any hurry. We'll be happy to listen to each and every one of you, and we hope all of you have questions. With that, we'll keep going. Okay, a little bit about the program history. How did our canal restoration program start? What have we done so far? And why are we doing this in the first place? Next. So when the Florida Keys were originally dug, 50, 60 years ago, they weren't created with the environment in mind. They were created with people in mind and with pleasure in mind. And that's so we created over 500 canals, and they with over 170 miles of canals, 312 miles of waterfront property. Obviously, you have waterfront property on each side of the canals. That's how you get 170 miles. So many of them were dug for fill to put the houses on. And so they were dug really deep, not all of them, but some of them, 10 to 40 feet deep to maximize the fill material. And what you see here on the right is a typical picture back in the day when they originally dug these. You can see how they're long and straight. They don't go anywhere, so they dead end. And these type of canals, these deep dead end canals, that cause a lot of environmental problems that we're going to get into a little bit later. You don't have any flushing. So you have water coming in on the open side, but it has nowhere to go to on the other side. So you get a lot of that stagnant water that can decay and smell. It can have low levels of oxygen in, either from the tube being too deep or from the decaying matter on the bottom. And like I said, this was initiated long before we thought about, what the environment was going to be, how that was going to be important with these canals. So that's kind of how we came up with all of these canals. The developers dug them for homes, and it was really, with the fill in mind for the homes and also with pleasure boating in mind. Next. I'm going to let Rick handle this slide because he did such a good job.
Well, thank you, Rhonda. And as Rhonda mentioned, to have a good understanding of where the issues with the canals were started, you have to go back to the history of the canals. As Rhonda mentioned, the excavation of the canals was typical of Florida back in those days. A lot of innovation. There was equipment that was put together specifically to dig the canals, and that's how they were able to get them as deep as they got them. If you're interested in this kind of thing, there was actually some permitting that was done, if you can believe it, way back then. But the permitting wasn't necessary until you connected the canals to the offshore waters, which is very intricate part of this history, how the canals connect to the offshore waters. So a lot of the digging was done before the canal was connected. So the last little bit of canal digging was actually blasted, which is why you have these deep canals with a very shallow entrance. And as we go through the slides, you'll get an understanding of how that is a big part of what created the problem. So to get an understanding, we've been working, as mentioned, on the technologies to improve the water quality in the canals for a little over a decade. But the canals from day one have been deteriorating because of how they were built. So that gives you an idea that we're taking care of a problem that was started many, many, many years ago. So it's not going to go away overnight, but surprisingly, we're able to, with some of the technologies, make fairly quick improvements to something that's been deteriorating for many years. Go ahead.
So back in the day, the state realized that we have some water quality issues here in the Keys, and they started what's called a reasonable assurance document with Mornoe County. That was for Mornoe County to provide reasonable assurance that our water quality issues would be addressed. And that first one back in 2008 dealt only with stormwater and wastewater. Then in 2011, we identified canals as a potential issue, and we identified the dissolved oxygen quality in the canals as a problem due to the poor circulation of these canals, the weeds that come in and sink to the bottom and decay, organic sediment accumulation, really too deep, the depths are too deep, you don't get any oxygen on the bottom. And so these are some of the things we added in 2011. Then in 2012, the Sanctuary Water Quality Protection Program added a subcommittee, and we went ahead with the Canal Management Master Plan. And in 2012 and 2013, we went and visited all 502 canals within the Keys. And we created this database of the Canal Management Master Plan, and we divided the canals into 3 rankings. Good meant they met dissolved oxygen requirements required by the state. Fair meant it didn't meet them all of the time, and poor meant they didn't meet the state requirements for dissolved oxygen any of the time. So that's how you got the good, fair, and poor. So as a reminder, fair and poor still do not meet state water quality standards. Then in 2014, under Commissioner George Nugent, we made the bold move to go ahead and say, let's commit $5 million to test these different techniques to how to restore the canals, because this program hadn't been done before. So we wanted to test them. And so we started that. Next. Then Isla Mirada and Marathon joined in with their own canal demonstration projects. And then FIU had a grant through the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, which is where we got our funds for the development of the master plan, to do water quality and benthic habitat for the demonstration and control canal. So you have to measure how successful these demonstration techniques were. And that's what FIU's role was. And then we kept rolling along, and then phase 3 of the Canal Management Master Plan consisted of attaining additional samples. So we went back out all to the canals, 500 in 2017, and took more samples, and also sediment characteristics for the poor and fair canals. We could tell how much muck was on the bottom of the canals. Then as we were just rolling along, getting all these demonstration projects wrapped up, Hurricane Irma struck in 2017. And so we set the canal restoration program aside. We received a $50 million grant from the federal government, and we went ahead and cleared over 250 canals of debris from Irma. Now, clearing canals of debris is not the same as restoring canals, because all that was removing the debris from the canals that was deposited. Things like gas cans, roofs, cars, all kinds of junk that fell in the canal. So once you take it out, it does help, obviously. It helps remove the junk, but it doesn't fix the problem with the canals. That's what restoration is. So that's the difference between restoration work and debris removal. Next. And then we got back to work, and in 2020, Monroe County, Islamorada and Marathon, we worked with the State Department of Economic Opportunity Office to develop a formal restoration work plan for the next decade. So now it's a more formal plan. Before it was voluntary, but the Governor DeSantis wanted us to make it more formal and include it in our comp plans in the county and the cities. And so that's what we did in 2020. Next. Okay, so now we're going to talk about why canal restoration is needed. If you live on a bad canal or a poor quality canal, you're going to know why. So it might look like some of these. You might have a lot of floating sargassum in it, especially during the summer when you just see these come in by the tons, especially on the ocean front, and then the bay front, we get the seaweed. And you can see on the bottom, we have a lack of flushing, that really poor quality water. It can smell. If it doesn't have a lot of dissolved oxygen in, you won't see a lot of marine life. And I have a lot of people ask me about the two deep canals, because sometimes canals look really beautiful. But just because they look beautiful or you have fish swimming on the top layer doesn't mean that they're good water quality, that they have appropriate levels of dissolved oxygen throughout the column. So these are some of the things we look at for the canal restoration program. So on our current list, we have 96 canals just in unincorporated Monroe. Islamorada and Marathon have their own list. And it's valued at over 540 million. So that's $500 million that's going to be needed to restore those canals. And when we look at that, we fix things like seaweed loading, accumulation, the lack of flushing that you see here in the canals. We backfill the two deep ones that have no oxygen. Those deep canals can have noxious layers of gas on the bottom too, that, our divers have to be careful when they're down there. So these are some of the reasons why canal restoration is needed. But what it really comes down to is we want to improve the environment. We want to improve the water quality by improving the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. Ultimately, that leads to more marine life and sea life in these canals and more seagrasses. And ultimately that, leads to more enjoyment by the people. So the goals and benefits, a little bit talk about here. Next slide. And Greg, did you want to do a slide or two on this?
Sure, I can jump in here, Rhonda. Yeah, so some of the goals, Rhonda had done already a great job demonstrating kind of why we're here. So when we looked at the Canal Management Master Plan, we had to look at the most viable technologies to improving the water quality and improving the dissolved oxygen. We wanted to facilitate permitting. That's a key component in executing these projects. So we had to create a streamlined process for that. We encourage public participation like we're doing tonight. We held multiple meetings with the Canal Subcommittee meeting and had that be a public open forum. We looked at the implementation costs, because that's really important when we start looking at the $500 million, as Rhonda had mentioned, and how do we start looking at which technologies are the most effective at improving that dissolved oxygen concentration. And then funding sources. So Rhonda and the county have been very active at looking for grant sources and going after grant opportunities. And I would say 99% of this program has been funded on the canal, on just grant. So that's a very impressive thing about seeking those funding sources.
All right.
So then as Rhonda, you want to touch on anything else?
Oh, go ahead. It's another benefit. You can go ahead.
Yeah, so just another benefit, obviously the water quality improvements, so we have the increased dissolved oxygen. Rhonda likes to say, those fish need that oxygen to live and breathe. So you want to have those, habitats be recreated for them. So manatees, fish, other things can recruit in those canals. Property values, this is a big one. So obviously when you live on a canal that has a lot of sargassum loading, a lot of degradation in the water quality, we had a few canals during the demonstration program where people couldn't even walk out their backyards. They couldn't rent their properties because of the just the nastiness of the hydrogen sulfide breakdown within the canal. So increasing your property values is another important part of the program. And then we kind of talked about this already with the public and the wildlife habitats, recreating that. You get your seagrass, your manatees coming back, you fish, all the good stuff. being able to swim in your canals is another thing that a lot of people mention that they used to, when they first moved to the canal, maybe back in the 70s, 80s, they used to be able to swim in their canal, and now they can't, just with the degradation over the past few decades. So,
All right.
so next we're going to get into the canal restoration work plan. I don't know if Ronnie, you want to
Yeah, I'll jump in. Mhm.
Okay.
So as I said, when we originally started out, it was really kind of voluntary what we were doing, and that's why we did the demonstration projects to test the various techniques. But now we've moved into a more formal plan. It's called the Canal Restoration Work Plan. And of course, we are in the area, Florida Keys area of critical state concern. But this work plan, as I said, it's now part of our comp plan filed with the state. It provides the framework and accountability for how we're going to implement these projects. And we're required to report annually to the state and our work program task and what we've been doing every year. If we don't meet a goal, we report that, and we have to make it up. And then if the Administration Commission determines that we haven't made our progress, the county could have our ROGO points reduced by 20%. But of course, we never want to get to that point. So we just keep pushing hard to get these work program tasks completed. And as I said, on that original list is a list of 96 canals. We have a lot to choose from and a lot to move forward with. And then finally, our summary and ranking list. So as I said, we have a list of 96. It adds up to over $500 billion. 500 billion, 500 million. Oh my goodness, I almost had a heart attack. So on that list, what we did when we ranked them, we didn't only rank them by water quality. We included other things like, ability to get a project permitted, how much it costs and things like that. When you get to the bottom of the list, you're going to see why we had to use cost as one of the factors, because some of these projects are really expensive. They're 10, 20, 30, 40, even $50 million. I think 49 million is the highest. So we get very limited funding every year, 5 or 6 million, on a good year with the state. And so that's why we had to rank some of the less costlier ones up front. And you can see this is our first page, the top 17 adds up to $21 million. We're working our way through that list of, back up, Greg. We're working our way through that top 10 list, 1 through 10. We've already had meetings with the canal homeowners on most of those top 10. Anything with the weed gate requires an operation maintenance plan, typically funded by the residents through an assessment. So we're very careful to work with the residents closely so they understand what's involved, or whether they want to proceed or not. And so these top 17 projects on the list add up to $21 million. So you can see if we got 5 or 6 million a year, that'd take already 4 or 5 years just to go ahead and fund these. We don't get that amount every year. Like during COVID, we didn't get anything that one year. So it varies up and down, but this governor has been really good, and he's really locking in a plan, and Roman and our guest, our county manager, is working with the state to try to lock in a plan so that we can count on a better, a more funding that's more accurate every year, and it's not so variable. Next. This is page 2, the next slide. So this adds up to another 18 million. So now we're up to 39 million cumulative. And you can see we're still in that far column from the second to the right. We're still in the 1.3 million. You see a couple in there for about 3 million, but still we've got a lot here to select from that are 2 million or less. Next page. Now you start seeing some of them push, number 47, 48, Rock Harbor and Cudjoe. We're starting to get into higher ones, 7 million, a couple of them there. Overall, not too bad. You start seeing some for 4 or 5 million, but now we're up to 41 million, and we're only to number 51. So you can see now how these costs are starting to increase. Next slide. Okay, this one adds up to 62 million, just one slide all by itself. And so now we're starting to get into the 12 million, the 16 million. Still in this page, there's still quite a few to select from below that, but that's why we kind of had to move, some of these more expensive ones. Next page to the bottom. And this one's 118 million. This one, we still got one more page to do. So let's jump to the next page. So this is the last page, and now you can see that column second to the right. You have 8 million, 13 million, 25 million, 23 million, 19 million, 19 million, and you see that 49 and 48 million on the bottom in that second column to the right. So those are really expensive projects. Those are big restoration projects, because these are big, long and winding canals. Most of them are just really, really deep and require a lot of backfill. So what I anticipate happening is we're going to take a second look at some of these really more expensive ones. that require full restoration and see if we can do things that cost less, that would help improve the water quality, would help improve the dissolved oxygen levels in these canals, but perhaps not perform a full restoration. Now, if we're lucky and someday we start, piping into a bigger grant source, as I said, right now we get 5 or maybe 6 million a year. If we find bigger grants or other grants, then we can restore these. But right now those are kind of at the end of the year and so end of the list. And so if you take that 5 or 6 million and divide it into the 500 million, you can see it would take us over 100 years at the current level of funding to get through this list. So we have a lot in front of us. Okay, Greg, you want to go ahead and get into this? So for those of you that live on a canal, you want to find out how do you access your canal number. We number all the canals, and I'll let Greg talk about that, and how you can find out where the water quality information is for your canal or any other canal you're interested in.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm gonna share this step-by-step process again at the end of the presentation. So don't think you have to write it down really quickly, but I'm gonna go ahead and click out of the presentation mode and kind of show you step by step and actually where you would go to get information on your canal number and how you would download that information. So the first thing you need to do is just go any web browser that you may have. And then what I do is I just usually go into the Google search up here and you just put in there Mornoe County Canal Restoration Program. The first link that pops up there is the canal, so just click on that first link. And then there's Rhonda's nice picture there. And then you just scroll down to the bottom here of the page, and you'll see a couple steps here outlining the process for downloading the Google Earth file. So if you already have downloaded Google Earth on your computer, you can skip this first step. If you don't, then you need to follow this process. Google Earth is a free application that you can download on your computer, so very easily friendly to use. So once you have that downloaded, then you merely just click on this Google Earth document. This is a hyperlink with this KMZ file, which is basically a Google Earth extension file. So you just click on that file, and then you can see here on mine down here in the bottom left, it sent me here and it told me it downloaded that file. And then what I would do is just go to my downloads folder, and then you would see here on your downloads folder those residential canals that you'd pick up. And so what you have to do here is merely just double click on that link. Once you double click on that link, it automatically brings it into Google Earth. So the file's already in Google Earth and you don't have to do anything further. And so now you have the database within the canal, within Google Earth. You can merely just put your address that you have into the web page up here. So we'll just use Bailey's Lane because that was one that we've done, one of our demonstration projects. So we'll use Bailey's Lane there, or Bailey's Road. Can't remember what it's there, but it'll zoom into that specific area or whatever your canal. I don't know why it gave me Bailey's Road. Should have gave me Bailey's.
Yeah, I gotta go to Bailey's Lane.
Yeah, Google Earth didn't like that. But all right, so then you come in your Bailey's Lane here, and then you merely to just move your mouse. You see your little hand here. If you move your mouse over top of that feature, that little purple feature there, it'll turn into a little actual mouse, and you just click on it, and it'll actually pop up with all of the information associated with your canal, giving you your minimum elevation data that we got. We got bathymetric data for all the canals, your sediment thickness. This is your average organic thickness here. It'll also give you the size of your canal. And then the key thing to note is this canal number up here. So when you look at it, you'll see 266 Big Pine Key. That's what you want to hold on. That's what you want to know. That is your canal when it comes back to looking at that spreadsheet of rankings. So that'll be how you correlate where you live and where your canal sits on the restoration table. And like I said, we'll put that step-by-step process back up on the presentation when we get going at the end of the presentation, so you can take a picture of it and do all that. So we will get back into the slides here.
Thank you. That was good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and now we're just going to talk about the restoration program progress. You want me to take over here, Ron, or you want to just?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, just continue here and just add in, obviously. All right, so we got the, we're just going to talk a little bit about what we've done. We've already touched a little bit on the Canal Management Master Plan, what it is, what it has in it. It's what we call like the Bible of the canal restoration program, how we move forward, all the information that we've ever gotten for the canal management or the canal restoration programs, all within that master plan. Then we'll talk a little bit about the demonstration program, and then finally some of our continued work with the program. So Ron already touched on this. We in the 2012, the Canal Restoration Advisory Subcommittee was created. This was to start looking at the issues associated with the canal and come up with a plan on how to resolve the issues with dissolved oxygen within these systems. And so that Canal Management Master Plan was born. The Canal Management Master Plan defined goals for the water quality improvements. They created that framework of how we rank the canal. So Rhonda touched on that. In the ranking list, it was a two-pronged process. We looked at water quality, and then we also looked at the technology and the implementation components of it. And that came up with a ranking score associated with that. And then we were able to prioritize which canals to move forward with in the demonstration projects and which specific technology to implement for those. And so that was when we moved forward with the demonstration projects. We implemented those. The real purpose of this program was to help us solidify moving forward with the overall restoration program, to understand the effectiveness of the technologies and determine the cost associated with each of those, which we'll talk about in the next few slides. So some of the technologies that we've initially looked at within the canal restoration program were air curtains, organic muck removal, culvert installation, and backfilling. And we'll show you each of those pictures in a little bit more descriptions on each of those in the next coming slides. But here are the canals that we actually implemented within the demonstration project. There were 6 canals looking at each technology. And then from this demonstration program, as Rhonda already alluded to, FIU did the post monitoring to determine the effectiveness so we can then understand which is the best technology to move forward with. So we're going to get into a little bit of each of the technologies and just give you an overview of what they do and the purpose of them. So we've talked about this before, but it's good to reiterate the purpose of the program is to focus on dissolved oxygen. We're not looking there for nitrogen, phosphorus. That's not the purpose of the program. Our purpose is to increase flushing, increase dissolved oxygen concentrations within these canal systems. So the removal of the accumulated organics. So this is a hydraulic process. We come in there with a hydraulic dredge. It removes that bottom material that's on the canals that have accumulated over the years. And then it's put into a dewatering system. And then from that dewatering system, brought to a final disposal location. Very intensive system. If you've seen some of the demonstration program, what we'll do, we'll show you some of the pictures, but it was a very lot of processing going on with that technology and very costly. So weed gates, air curtains, those physical barriers, we'll call them more of a preventive and kind of a preventive measure in terms of after we implement other technologies such as organic removal, backfilling, or even a culvert, we'll add an air curtain in there to prevent the further degradation of that canal system from the seaweed and sargassum floating within the canal systems. Culvert connections, pretty straightforward, adding them to dead-end canal systems to increase flushing. Most preferred technology, whenever we can, we look at including culverts to improving, very instantaneous improvement in dissolved oxygen. Backfilling, we touched on that. It's really just the movement of the deep stagnant zones into backfilling up to 6 to 7 foot below mean low water to increase the dissolved oxygen within those systems. And then capping finally is we look at capping at each canal. So it's very specific. So if we have a shallower canal that still requires organic muck removal, capping may not be the best preferred methodology because we need to maximize still the navigational aspects of it. But when we're looking at a 40-foot deep canal that does have some muck on the bottom, what we can do instead of having to go down there and hydraulically remove that material, we can then cap that material and then come up. So it just saves costs associated with each of the canal restoration projects. And here's just a quick snapshot. Obviously, it's much easier to see some pictures than talking words on a slide. So it's always good to see kind of some of the implementation of each of the technologies, as you can see here within this slide.
And Greg, I think it's also
Yeah.
important to point out that these are the technologies that were actually implemented, but there were additional technologies that were studied and turned out to be too expensive or not thought to be effective enough. So these aren't all the technologies that were studied. The program did take into account technologies that were discarded, for example, pumping water throughout the canal because it's too energy intensive and too expensive to maintain. So in addition to these, other technologies were studied as part of the program.
Yep, good point, Rick. Thanks. All right, so the first project we're going to go through is the backfilling project. This was in Key Largo. We put about 25,000 cubic yards of material in this canal. And you're probably like, what does cubic yards even mean? Well, it's about 1,200 trucks of material have to be brought into this canal to raise it from almost 35 feet all the way up to 7 feet. And we've had a lot of success within this canal system. A lot of folks have called Rhonda and said how much the seagrass is starting to recruit, how much wildlife is starting to come back in this canal. So a really good, successful project that was implemented in Key Largo. This other two projects that we did for the demonstration project was the organic muck removal. I had mentioned this. You can see on the top right-hand picture, that's an actual hydraulic dredge system that removes that muck material, unconsolidated material along the bottom, and then pumps it to a dedicated dewatering system. That material is then dewatered, and then finally, after it meets a certain concentration, it's removed to either beneficial reuse location, which we try to achieve in most aspects if we can, but sometimes the material that we're pulling out of these canals has a lot of metals like arsenic and other things in it that are concerned, so we have to then bring it to a landfill to dispose of that material. And in these particular two canals, I think it's always important, there was almost 5 feet of material that had to be removed from this canal. In the back end of these canals, you could walk almost across the back end of these canals. That's how much they were full of this muck material. The culvert installation projects, we've done 2 of those so far, one down in Geiger Key and one in Big Pine Key. Again, the purpose of this is to increase flushing between the 2 dead-end canal systems. So what we do there is we install a culvert. And it's important here to note, these culverts are submerged culverts. So they're not culverts that are above the water line at any point during the tidal cycle, because what we want to do is want to try to achieve the increased flushing between those tidal cycles. So everything is submerged, so we don't have any issues with potential migration of sargassum or other things that go through the culverts. I know a lot of folks think, hey, you're going to pass one seaweed to my other side and eat with the other side. So I think it's important to note that all of these culverts are submerged when we're looking at installing these. The air curtain projects, there's been multiple air curtain projects across the Keys. The Village of Islamorada has installed a few in the Lower Matecumbe and Plantation Key, and the county also has a few down in Big Pine Key. Again, as I mentioned, the purpose of these are prevention. You can see there on the bottom right-hand picture, the diffusers that lay along the bottom of the canal. A compressor then runs air to those diffusers. Those diffusers produce a surface disruption, and then that surface disruption is enough to keep the sargassum and other floating debris from going into those dead-end canal systems and causing that degradation. And so here's just a couple of pictures of some of the progress that has been done with the Keys, kind of outlining those demonstration projects along with the continued work that the county and the municipalities have been doing for the canal restoration program. And that Canal 266 Big Pine Key, that's that intensive dewatering system that I was telling you about. That was on one of the vacant properties there. We had probably 3 or 4 pieces of equipment stacked in there. It was pretty impressive in terms of how they were able to manipulate the area to achieving that project. And then here are a few other projects that the county has done up in Key Largo. One being the project Canal 29, which we already talked about, the Canal 83, which was a backfilling and organic muck removal, and then Canal 75, which was that capping and then backfilling project, which we talked about previously. And next, we're going to get into some of the regulatory requirements, and I'll let anyone else who wants to jump in here, Rick or Rhonda, please do. So we already talked a little bit about the Florida Keys Reasonable Assurance Document and its purpose in looking at wastewater and stormwater, and that being the driver for that program. Well, what that program highlighted was the issues associated with the lack of flushing within these systems and not meeting the dissolved oxygen concentrations, which are standards met by or set by DEP. So I think that's very clear to mention that the county doesn't set those standards. Those are standards that are driven by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And within the canal systems, they're qualified as Class 3 waters. So we have to meet those specific standards for dissolved oxygen, which Rhonda had mentioned. There's about 96 of them on our list currently that do not meet that water quality standard for dissolved oxygen. And so again, to kind of elaborate further on the reasons why the Canal Restoration Project and the program is so important. So the University of Miami just recently did a study where they looked at how the canals impact nearshore waters and whether they impact nearshore waters. And some of the results that they came about were showing that there was pollution that was coming from these canals out into the nearshore waters, which was showing a degradation in the benthic resources at the mouth and into the nearshore waters. So it's very important that we continue with this canal restoration program and continue to improve on the water quality within these canals to further help the nearshore waters. And next, I think I'm going to turn it over to Rhonda and she can wrap up here. Or do you want me to continue, Rhonda, and then we can go in the restoration funds? Up to you.
I can do a little bit. Okay, so here as we talked about, there's different options for different canals. So it's not the same restoration technique for every canal because they're all different. Some are too deep and that's their only problem. Some are long and winding and they have very stagnant water at the end. Some are maybe not too deep, they're not long and winding, but they just dead end at the, at the dead end side of the canal, and maybe they need a connection to another water source so you can increase that flushing and increase that dissolved oxygen. So when we're looking at this restoration program, it's different. Every canal needs a different remedy. Even if you have two canals side by side that are too deep, it could be very different techniques for restoring them. So you heard Greg talk about there's backfill where we just come in and backfill, and then sometimes we need to do a little muck removal on the bottom or capping on the bottom before we do the backfill. So it's all based on the geographic characteristics of each canal. And so we try to get the most cost-effective and efficient solutions for these restorations because our funds and our resources are limited. Okay, so as we discussed, where does our funding come from? Well, it doesn't come from your tax dollars, at least the ones that you pay to Monroe County. Our canal restoration program is almost entirely funded by grant funds. So in the early planning processes, when we were developing the Canal Management Master Plan, we were lucky enough to get annual funding from the Environmental Protection Agency, the same federal agency that is funding this outreach tonight. So we received annual funds on a yearly basis to develop that master plan and to go out and touch all of those 502 canals and do the water quality sampling and do the sediment sampling. So that's how we were able to get the master plan development paid for. And now these construction projects, those federal funds don't go towards actual restoration projects. They're more for research and planning. But our actual construction funds, as it says here, are mainly from the state, from what's called the stewardship fund, about $5 million a year on if we're in a good year. Typically, that's about what we get. Like I said, once in a while we don't get anything, or we get lower based on the economic factors going on in Florida. And then we have a one-time pot called the Restore Funds of about $20 million, and that's from the BP oil spill. So we're just now dipping into that pot for our first restoration program under that. That's a federal grant. We have to apply for those funds just like any other grant. Even though they're set aside for us, we have to meet all the federal granting requirements. It's a very complex process, and hopefully we'll get that project underway soon. But as you can see, the $5 million into $500 million, it'd take over 100 years to restore these canals at the current rate of funding if we, move forward with the restoration techniques and costs as discussed in the plan. And then, so the county funds, through grant funds, the construction of these. Now, if there's any operations and maintenance required, which there is when you have a weed gate, no matter what type of weed gate is, then the county commissioners have said that they want that benefit to be funded by the residents. That's a specific benefit to the residents that live on that canal. And so to keep that air curtain going or the weed gate maintained, we have the vendor come out and dive it and things like that. We typically set up an assessment for that. And that's why any canal now that has a weed gate on it, that's required, we meet with the residents in advance. And if they don't see the benefit of that canal restoration program, even with, the assessment, then we move on and we would come back to those later if we can develop different techniques. Next. So what's next in our program? So we have a lot going on. Since we've been able to get a lot of designs, we have this Canal 475 and Geiger Key. That's a culvert. So that's going to connect, I believe, 2 different canals together to increase the flushing. And as Greg said, those culverts are placed below the water level. So you're not going to get the sargassum. If there's any in one canal, it's below water. So the sargassum doesn't go under. So you get very little. Plus we put on manatee gates on these culverts to stop any seaweed that does get underneath, and plus, of course, to help protect the manatees. Then we're looking at Big Pine Key, Canal 259. That's a culvert and a physical weed gate. So that, I believe that's our restore funded project. And we're looking at a physical weed gate instead of the air curtains. We tried to come up with an alternative weed gate. It's just like a big chain link fence that goes open and shut. And we're hoping that that's going to be a lot less maintenance required. And so the assessments on those we're hoping can be a lot lower. And then we have Canal 28 and 25 and 90. We got 3 backfill projects going in Key Largo. We've actually there are 2 of those are out for bid right now. 90 is about to go out for bid. So hopefully by summer, the end of the summer, we're going to have a lot of construction projects under the way. And then the ones that are currently in design to be constructed after, of course, the design is finished, is a potential injection well project in Key Largo. Big Pine Key, number 278, another injection well. So these will be the first 2 times we're going to use these. So we're looking at those very carefully. And then in Big Pine Key, a backfill project on 291. So we work through this list. We meet with the residents. We set up our virtual meetings with the residents on these canals to go over the conditions and what to expect and, how their water quality might benefit, and if there's any assessment. And then we continue to work through this ranked list of 96 canals. And we also like to do these countywide meetings like we're doing this evening. So it's not focused on any one specific canal or neighborhood. We just kind of like to get out the word of what the general canal restoration program is about. And I believe that wraps up our presentation. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and open the floor up to any of you that may have questions about what you've seen tonight, and we'll be happy to answer them. And we're in no rush, so don't feel that you need to be in a hurry. So Greg, if you want to go ahead and raise your hand, and Greg can unmute you, and we can go ahead and start the public engagement process.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I'll put the this thing back up here. And you could raise your hand just like you would on the computer, so that you there's a share thing up there, right, Rhonda? I'm trying to remember now on Zoom.
On the bottom of the screen. There. Wait a minute. Well, this is a little different.
I always forget. I can't say, I don't think I'm the host now, so let's see.
Well, you can put a chat in and say you want to be called in. You can raise your hand. You can physically wave at us, and we'll call on you. Whatever way works for you.
Looks like Gary's down there.
right.
Raising his hand.
Okay.
Gary, go ahead.
I don't have a question. I just want to thank both you and Rhonda for the fantastic job and that you're doing. You're doing great work, and we so appreciate your efforts. I can't tell you how much of a difference it's made already. We were one of the canals that you could literally not sit outside with the sulfuric acid. And I just wanted to thank you. If anyone needs any help or any questions, I'm happy to answer. Other than that, I just wanted to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. So Gary is on Canal 84. That's a current restoration project. If you want to see what it looks like, you can drive up to, what is it, Cuda Road?
Grouper Lane and Cuda Lane.
So we're restoring that canal right now. It's a muck removal backfill and weed gate at the end. And we've been working with Gary and that neighborhood for over 5 years, trying to get to this point. It's been a long haul. And so I'm just really glad we're able to finally get there and help Gary and his neighbors because it's a really bad canal.
Thank you, guys.
All right. We have a chat from Rick. Let me see. So
Yeah,
Rick
Rick.
Hardy, go ahead.
I was
No,
gonna
I was
say,
going to mention that the question, Greg, and I think we've addressed this before, is regarding the aeration, using individual aerators behind homes. And I think you can speak to the impact, which is unfortunately fairly minimal from the weed gates with regards to increasing the dissolved oxygen.
So let me just quick read the question for those that can't see it. So the question was, has there been any research on the use of individual aerators behind houses? Individual grant programs would be helpful and much less expensive.
yeah, and I'll start it, and then Stephen Hanks, one of our senior engineers, can also jump in and elaborate further. As Rick had mentioned, these individual aeration systems are good at improving the dissolved oxygen in a small concentrated area, such as your backyard, your back in your canal, but it doesn't do a good enough job at improving the water quality within the entire system and turning over the amount of volume that we would need to increase the dissolved oxygen to meet those standards if your canal doesn't meet them. So that's kind of the negatives behind those systems. And then also some of the permitting issues that have come around is that the systems have been installed, homeowners have been turning them on, and then let's just say you either stop using them or you sell your house, and then that person who sells or buys the house is no longer going to want to operate and maintain those systems. And what happens is you create a false environment for wildlife and others to accumulate. And then when you turn that system off, they almost in a sense of it lost. And so then they kind of go out into the area that has lack of dissolved oxygen, and then it creates fish kills. So there was some fish kill incidents that had occurred in the Keys because of that issue that had happened with the operation of those systems. But I'll stop talking and let Stephen answer some more of the engineering technical stuff.
Yeah, just real quick, the aerators that are commonly used for ponds are really used mostly for stratification, destratification, I should say. And they're using them so that it basically doesn't, the pond doesn't produce hydrogen sulfide. So it achieves a much lower standard or performance than what we need. We have to meet the state standard, which is, basically 42% at a minimum of dissolved oxygen. And the diffusers really work more, in a deeper setting. So if you're in a shallow canal that's say 8 feet deep, you're really getting very minimal effect from having a diffuser down the center line. So the effect is really just the circulation, just because the bubble is in the water column for such a short period of time, it doesn't have any time to really diffuse into the water. And there are ways using other types of pumps like Venturis, where you basically create a vacuum that creates a micro bubble that'll go into the water, and that'll have a much better effect of bringing oxygen in. And there's even different technologies called species cones that do that very efficiently, but still it has a massive consumption of power, especially when you have to circulate the oxygenated water to have the effect. So those mechanical systems are really something that we try and stay away from because of the power associated with it and the need to establish an assessment to cover the electrical costs. So right now, the areas that we're looking at are such as the injection well are passive, and those will basically not need any type of mechanical power to promote circulation. They're basically just relying on the difference between surface water and groundwater.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next question from Linda. It said, with culverts, what do both ends connect to? So I don't know, Greg, if we have a good slide we can refer to, or if you just want to go ahead and handle that question. Or Rick, or
Yeah, well, so what do both ends connect to? So they connect to either end of the dead end canal system that we're connecting the two culverts to. So, you know, for example, if we have two dead end canal systems that kind of abut each other, we would connect those two with a culvert. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and also too, Greg, maybe it should be added that, you know, we have a flush treatment against the head wall. So normally the culvert will basically finish at the head wall and then it'll be grouted into the head wall. So basically you have just a, you know, end treatment like that. So it doesn't have the pipe just sticking out in the slope.
So I'm going to use my fingers. If you have one canal that looks like this and one canal with my hands that looks like this, and there might be like a road in the middle, but you have two dead end canals, you might have the ocean on one side. So what we do is we connect a culvert to connect these two dead ends. So that way you have flow through both of those canals, like connecting that culvert there. So you connect the two together and you don't have that dead end to those two dead end canals anymore. Obviously it won't work like this, but we can make it work even if the canals are way far apart. You know, we put a couple in, we've got some in our plan. You can go quite a ways. I don't know how many yards, but we've gone one with quite a few yards apart. We just put a longer culvert in. Obviously more expensive, but it can be done. Any other add-ons to that, anyone?
Ron, I was just going to mention that, I don't know if you want to mention to these folks, if we don't answer your question or you have additional information, you can always send an email to Rhonda and we could talk further about it. Like, so if that individual aerator still had a question or wanted to talk more in detail, we can talk further about that.
Yep. Okay, next question is from Tom. What is the time frame on design, permitting, and construction for the injection well on Canal 278? Is that the one in Big Pine, I'm assuming?
Yeah, the Eden Pine.
Yeah, Eden Pine. So that is just under very preliminary design right now. We don't have any funds for the construction. We want to make sure we take our time working through the design and permitting requirements because it isn't, you know, one of our first two of the injection wells. And so we're going slowly and carefully and dependent on how well that goes and how fast it goes. If we can't get the permits for them, then it'll, you know, then it'll be added on to the list seeking construction funds. So I don't know if we'll be ready for that by this summer. It might be next summer. Next question, Canal 297 resident meeting. We were in the process of buying a house and they weren't able to vote and are wondering if the project was voted in. If you could go ahead and just call me tomorrow. I have the list. I just received it today of which of those projects passed. This was this Big Pine Key?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe this one did pass. You can correct me if I'm wrong, right, Greg?
Yes, I'm confident. Yeah, I think this was one of the ones that.
So this one did pass with the yes vote. So you, most of the residents there wanted to move forward with the assessment and the canal restoration. So that will be transferred to the active list. We will be actively seeking grant funds this summer because the next cycle of the stewardship grant opens this summer. Next question, Linda. Please explain how injection wells would work, please. I'm going to keep this, I'm going to, I guess, maybe Greg, you start out and then Stephen, we're going to keep it simple if you want. I don't want to get too much into the weeds because it doesn't apply to everybody, but we can go ahead and explain the simplicity of part of it. If you have still further questions after that, feel free to call me and Greg tomorrow. We can go over it again.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to be, I'm going to put my planning hat on, not engineering hat on. So basically what we've accounted for is it's as simple as a vertical culvert. Think of it as such. So we're taking a culvert and we're just moving it this way. And we're allowing, as Stephen had mentioned, the differential between the canal water and then the groundwater within the well. And then that creates a positive movement of water down the well to then increase the canal water and increase the volume enough to improve the dissolved oxygen.
So it's pulling by going down, the water going down that injection well at the back end. It's placed at the back end of the canal. It pulls in then water from the front end of the canal. So you have this slow flow through of water, and then hopefully it would increase the dissolved oxygen.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you know, explain some of the geology that we're working with. These wells are basically 2-foot diameter and they're open hole intervals from 60 feet to 120 feet. And so basically what the driller does is they drill down to about 30 feet, put a surface casing in, and go down to 60 feet and have a casing. There'll be a 2-foot diameter PVC, and then from then down, it's just an open hole. And this is going into limestone with big solution cavities with really, really high conductivity rates. That's a term we use to describe the rate of infiltration and water flow in the subsurface. And so we have the potential to move a lot of water from the canal into the well because of that capacity. And where the benefit is really provided is that there's a dynamic between the tide and how it moves in, and it really kind of functions, as a static wave where, the incoming tide doesn't necessarily mix so much with the water in the canal. It more or less just pushes it up. And this well will basically provide a pressure relief, if you think of it that way, that allow for the incoming tide to mix a lot more with the water in the canal as it's going up, rather than just basically causing the water in the canal to go up and down.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay, moving on from Paul. Paul says, thank you. Well, we thank you too, Paul. We want to thank everyone who's on. Next question from Colby. Are there any plans on unplugging the canal on Eagle Street in Key Largo? Sorry, Eagle Drive. I'm going to tell you what I tell all the other many, many hundreds of people that call me over the years. So there's at least 13 plug canals in the Keys. And we get calls, a lot of calls when, people are looking at buying homes on these plugged canals because the realtors aren't quite as forthcoming. They don't know if they're ever going to be unplugged. And of course, if they would be unplugged, that would increase the value. But what the regulatory agencies look at, Greg, you can assist me when I'm done. What they look at when people come in for like a pre-application meeting to determine, what do you need to unplug these canals? Well, they're going to look at the effects that would be any negative effects on the environment that would cause from unplugging these canals. So, for instance, most of these plug canals have been plugged for decades, so the water quality in them may not be so great. You're probably low on oxygen, and there's no flow through, there's no anything with a fresh water source. And so they tend not to be of the best quality. Oftentimes, there might be really nice lush seagrass beds on the outside of the plug canal. And so if you unplug that canal and take the plug out, you would increase the boat traffic, and there might be some detrimental effects to, any nice seagrass beds. Plus, taking the plug out, you're now mixing the water that's in that plug canal with the water on the outside, and that could be a negative effect also. I don't know, Greg, if I'm missing anything else.
Nope, you hit everything.
All right, so, we've had a lot of people ask over the years. Nobody has been successful yet. So that's just, the way it is. Hang on. Debbie Colby says, thank you, you're welcome. How are the canals with mangrove overgrowth handled that impede the canal navigation when it comes to dredging the canal restoration? The mangrove obviously were not native to canals because they were man-made. Greg, you want to handle that one? That's a good question.
Yeah, so typically what we would do when we have mangroves that are overgrowing and causing impacts to navigation, we can trim those mangroves back. So one of the things that we try to do within these restoration projects is minimize impacts to the resources within the Florida Keys, even including mangroves within a natural area. So they may have not been, naturally there when the canal was dug, but they have now come back maybe because of non-development within that canal system. So what we can do, depending on the condition of the canal or the mangrove. So if there's mangrove prop roots, if there's actual branches, there are actually trees that are growing within the center of the canal, that's another story. That's another thing that we have to evaluate, because then that is actual removal of a mangrove, and that causes additional impacts and additional mitigation that we have to deal with. But if it's merely just the overgrowth of trim limbs and other things that are kind of growing into the canal that can be trimmed back using DEP standards for trimming, that is things we have done in the past. And there was another one on there, Rhonda, before this one too.
Pardon?
There was another question from Debbie.
Okay. I just wanted to add here, if you're not in a canal restoration, you have overhanging mangroves. You can hire a certified mangrove trimmer to trim them. Do not do it on your own because it's, you know, you're going to get fined. Don't want to do that, especially don't cut them down. The county doesn't fund that mangrove trimming. We only do it if they're on a lot owned by a county. So I just want to make that clear because I get a lot of calls about that. If it's, you know, the mangroves are in front of a county-owned lot, we will send somebody out there to trim them. But if they're in, you know, in front of private homes, you're going to have to pay for that on your own. But just make sure you hire a certified mangrove trimmer. So the question before that is, I see that the canal I live on, oh, I'm glad you looked it up, 433 shows poor water quality on the Google Earth list, but fair on the project spreadsheet. So which is correct? Good
Yeah, so
question.
the fair water quality on the list is the correct one. So the information that's shown on the canal management database in the Google Earth is from 2013 when we initially did our assessments, and we haven't since updated that. We're actually in the process of making that a lot more user-friendly in terms of a active system. So when we get water quality data, we get more additional information, it'll automatically update and won't be a stagnant type of data set. So that's why you see somewhat of the differential between the data that you are on the Google Earth, which is what's on our list.
So that will be updated by the end of the summer, you think, Greg?
Yeah, we're in the process of getting the data right now, and Stephen and I are working together on. We'll work together on getting the GIS, kind of make it more user friendly, kind of like what we did for the roads project.
Yeah, and update the information in it.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, we have another new message coming in. Just a second here. Just Debbie says, thank you. Thank you, Debbie. We're happy to have you with us. Am I missing anything? We'll wait another minute in case anybody else wants to say anything. You don't have to write it down. You can raise your hand and talk if you'd like. Anybody, Greg or Rick, you have anything to add, Stephen, while we're waiting for additional questions? Renee?
No, I mean, I would just kind of elaborate further on what I said previously about the differential between maybe poor and fair. So one of the things that you had mentioned is that we're continuing to get water quality data. We're not just sitting around and saying, hey, what we got in 2013 was good enough, because it's not. It doesn't give us enough real determination on success of that canal and the parameters that we need to look for. So over the past, we've done it now 3 or 4 times, Stephen, gotten additional water quality data to add to that database to continue to look at the water quality and the impairment associated with it.
Yeah, and to add to that, the state regulations kind of work on a grouping system. You know, you can't really take one water quality sample and determine whether or not a water body meets the standards. You really need a data set of up to about 10 samples, and then you're allowed to have up to 3 samples that don't meet the standard and still be in compliance with the regulation. So for us, you know, we have to collect additional rounds of sampling to continually try and determine whether or not you know, the water body continues to exhibit the degraded water quality.
Thank you. Gregory Barsh says, thank you. We thank you, Gregory. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Rhonda, the only thing I would add, and again, I'm really happy to have the participation that we have, but just as the data is being updated, our information is continually being updated, even with the technology. So as we implement these technologies and continue to look at them, this is a very fluid program, and we've gotten a lot of good ideas from participants and residents in the Keys. A lot of times we have discussions about a particular technology or particular outlook. So it truly is an interactive program, and we do appreciate the input both from the residents on the canals that have had technologies applied to them, and residents who maybe haven't had them yet, but have some ideas as to why would this work or why wouldn't this work. So I'm just encouraging folks not to be shy about exchanging ideas and telling us or picking our brains or telling us something we may not know. And those discussions have come up in the individual canal lineup as we have discussions with the residents of those canals. A lot of times we tell them what technology has been selected, and they have questions, have ideas for modifications, and those are all welcome.
That's right, absolutely. We've learned a lot by having these individual meetings with the canal homeowners. You know, we don't live on these canals. You guys do as the residents, and even though we may have been visited them several times for debris removal or collection of water samples, we still don't know them like you do. So it's really helpful to have these individual meetings with the residents on these canals before we move forward with the restoration to help learn even more. We have another question, I think it was related to our previous discussion from Debbie. Over what period of time are the water samples procured?
Steven, you want to go ahead and answer that?
Yeah, sure. The water sampling typically takes about 2 months to complete, and with the funding cycles that we were able to get the sampling completed, it was 2017 previously, and then just now in 2021. So that basically was one event per 4 years. And also that kind of fits with the initial phase of analysis we did was in 2013. So we'll continue to try and work with EPA and other sources to get more funding and possibly look at more robust sampling protocols to possibly get us closer to the full data set that the state requests. So those are things we're looking at in the future, but basically as needed, we'll be sampling every couple of years to keep building that database.
So we've been out there, I believe, in 2013, 2017, and 2021, where we visited all 500 canals, if I'm remembering correctly. And we'll be going again, because we have to keep that database updated. All right, we have another question from Jeff. Has the water quality changed in canals since the septic tanks have been abandoned and gone to sewer system? Another really good question. Greg, you want to take a stab at that? I know that this is not part of our program, but I think FIU had done some research on this.
Yeah, so as I'd mentioned, the purposes of our program is looking more on the dissolved oxygen concentration side of things. The sewers and septic tanks, abandoning those is obviously driving down your total nitrogen, total phosphorus concentrations being discharged into those water bodies. And FIU, along with municipalities in Mornoe County, have been doing water quality studies, and they just did release, I don't know if they did the final release of the RAD, but I think they finished up the water quality monitoring, and the monitoring was showing in a lot, if not, I think there was maybe 2, what they call WIBITs, which are water body identification areas, that weren't still meeting the standard for the state for those specific issues. So the septic conversion to sewer is making a positive impact within the water quality, and that is shown in this. It's going to be shown in this release of the RAD coming out.
Yeah, so I'll add on to that. So the Department of Environmental Protection, the state department, DEP, they had partnered with Mornoe County a couple of years ago to do this water quality sampling throughout the Keys in support of continuing that reasonable assurance document. They're due for an update, and so the University of Miami was hired. We split the costs with DEP to do that sampling over a 2-year period. All of those sampling results were turned over to DEP. They haven't yet issued the update on the reasonable assurance document, so we're waiting for that to see how the water and the quality in the nearshore waters and the canals may have changed.
Yeah, and to add to that too, we're still looking at the full statistics of the data set that we just collected, but just a preliminary comparison between the data set we have now from 2021 to 2017, it does seem that, in general, that the water quality has improved.
Excellent. We want everybody's canals to be beautiful and good water quality. Anybody else have questions? You can chat or raise your hand. Can I mute you?
Everybody's already going for dinner.
Yeah, you could have been eating your dinner. That's why we like these virtual meetings, because you can be anywhere and you can eat your dinner while you're watching us. We've had people call in from Los Angeles, from up north and West Palm Beach and Orlando. So that is part of the beauty of having these virtual meetings. You don't have to be in a little room with just people that are in that immediate area. You can reach out and, chat with a lot of people. We'll be doing these more along the way. Now that we're back into the groove. And so, this is March. I don't know when we'll do the next one, but within a year, we'll reach out and do some more updates, and we'll be reaching out to the people on the active canal restoration list if we need to talk to them about assessments or about their potential restoration. Just been trying to really get the outreach up and going. So I don't see any other chats yet. We'll wait another minute, but I want to thank everyone again for joining us this evening. I hope you learned something. If you want to contact me, you feel free to call me or email me at any time. And if you need one of our technical assistants, I can grab Greg or Rick or Steven to join us on an email.
Somebody raised their hand, Rhonda.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
I don't know if Renee, you have to. There you go.
Donna.
That's my wife's name. Sorry about that. Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Hey, we live on the main canal here on Geiger, and I saw that Topino had just done a culvert coming from a dead-end canal off the ocean and connecting underneath Boca Chica Road to the salt pond on the other side. Now, on our main canal here, I believe we're going to get done at some point. Where will they connect that? Because we don't, at the end of our canal, there's like 2 streets. But if you just kept going in the direction of the canal, you'd have to go a great distance to get to another canal if you just went straight.
Greg's going to show you. And we didn't connect to a salt pump, by the way, but we can go ahead and look in on that. Great question.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't catch your name, so I'll just.
It's Jim. Sorry about that.
Jim. Yeah, no worries, Jim. So Jim, the culvert that Topino is currently doing right now, this was an existing culvert that went along Boca Chica Road. You can see my mouse right here. It was installed between these two, and right now they're actually just realigning this southern portion of the culvert to put it more into the center of the canal. So that's what they're wrapping up right now. So your canal, which is 475, which is this larger canal system down here on the southern side, what we plan on doing is adding a culvert. I'll draw a little line here, draw a line, and then coming back up to this this canal up here to the north. And we're going to connect both of these dead ends to that system. So basically what we'll have is a run that would go out to Vega Lane, and then Vega Lane up across Boca Chica, and then same here, out to Vega Lane, up to Boca Chica, connect to this canal system. And we've seen real good success in the tidal fluctuation between these two canal systems, because as you know, this canal to the north up here is actually connected to the Gulf through this main channel here. Sorry, so I still have a little line, but up through this main channel here across a bridge or culvert crossing up here that grows underneath US 1. So that's why you have a lot of flushing that occurs within this Bay Area.
Awesome. Are they going to have to dig the road up for that?
So they will have to dig out a portion of the road, but it won't impact access to your, being able to utilize the road. So what they'll end up doing is the open cut certain sections of it, and then use steel plates as needed throughout construction, mostly trying to hug the right of way along Vega Lane. So we're going to try to hug the right of way as much as possible to try to avoid as much impacts to the actual access of the Vega Lane down to your properties.
My house is on Boca Chica Road. I know I'm only 4 houses in from that side street there. So, yeah, right there. And our canal is extremely deep. Is there? Do they ever do culverts and add material to bring the bottom up? I would bet our canal's 30 feet deep.
Yeah, so we do multiple technologies, but what we've seen in success and what we'll need to evaluate here is adding a culvert has done well in improving the flow and the turnover within that canal system. And based on our hydrologic models that we've done, has shown an increase in that volumetric turnover, even with that extensive depth within your system, which is calculated when we do the modeling. So what we end up doing, is monitoring that canal after we install the culverts to ensure that it's successful in improving the dissolved oxygen. If it's not, then the county will evaluate whether we need to add additional technologies such as a backfilling, or there also has been discussions on whether an air curtain would need to be placed at the mouth of that canal.
I thought that other canal there, the lower one, was getting an air curtain.
Yeah, so this is Canal 474. This is on the list. And we are in discussions with them, or already had meetings with them.
Oh,
They
I
sent back their voting results, and so we're looking
I thought it was a different canal that was getting the curtain. I got you. So, was there also someone I thought had said there was going to be 2 culverts? Is that correct?
2 culverts, that go down Vega Lane and then connect here. So 1 culvert's coming from this dead end canal system, and 1 culvert's coming from this. So
Oh,
they're
well, it
up to that
won't
one.
be 2 pipes connecting. Won't be 2 pipes for like more volume. It'll just be 2 separate ones.
No, there's 2 pipes, right, Stephen? I'm trying to remember now off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure there's 2 pipes that we're adding, 1 from this.
Yeah, they're staying separate.
Yeah.
They
that's
are?
right.
I see.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Hey, thanks,
Yeah, just
guys.
to avoid the head differential.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
And
Thanks.
I was driving when you guys went on,
Oh.
so I didn't get to do much seeing until I got home.
Oh.
Any idea when we're going, when we're scheduled?
I forget what number you are on the list. I think you're kind of a little ways down there. We tend to go in order unless there's a reason like where we could get a more effective result by doing a geographic area and, working together. So we're taking a look at this canal because we are doing so much other work in the area. And we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can do the culvert, first and then, wait a while before we see if we need to do a backfill.
That'd be terrific.
Yep.
Okay, I figured I heard you guys say how to look up my canal number, so I can do that.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks,
Oh, you're
everyone.
most welcome.
Okay, have a great night.
Thanks,
Okay.
too.
Don't think we have any other questions. We wait quite a
There's
while. I
one.
don't see any more in the chat. We have another one. Okay,
Yeah, that's Ray.
great.
Yes, I'm just trying to unmute. Thank you for the opportunity. Real quick, and maybe you can't answer the question, you may direct me to one of your links, but I live off of Mangrove Lane, up Upper Key Largo, and there's rumors in the neighborhood that they're somehow going to connect the Lake Surprise through the very east end of that canal to have water flow, better water flow into that canal, and then it leads back out to Sexton Cove. Is there any
We're
truth to
gonna
that?
look. We're looking right now. Give us just a second.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything in the works at the moment for Canal 24. This canal is likely probably on the restoration list. I'd have to look at the table, but if you send an email, Ray, to Rhonda, then we can look into it a little bit further and tell you
Great,
more.
thank you for, great, that'll work. Thank you so much.
Yeah, or you can call me tomorrow. Okay. Anything else? Anybody else? Probably going to go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everybody for attending this evening. I hope you learned something. If you have any other questions we haven't answered, feel free to reach out to me tomorrow or any other time. And if I need technical support, I can always bring in one of the technical members of the team. This is a really program near and dear to my heart. We really like this because we're able to help the environment and help people enjoy their canals more. And it's, it's a very interesting program to work on. So thank you for attending this evening. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you at our next canal meeting. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.